As Gribble relayed the details of the leadership meeting, a hush fell over the party. The young goblin made sure to withhold information regarding Lux's mother and her unsettling connection to Dr. Ackerman Diamante. The tension in the room escalated, however, as Gribble pointed an accusatory finger at Tarth, demanding an explanation for his mysterious ties to this disturbing greater mother figure that has captivated so many in Zambieu. Lux, ever observant, narrowed her eyes and focused intently on Tarth, keen to decipher the truth hidden within his body language. With his hands trembling and chest pressed forward portraying a mixture of vulnerability and righteous defiance against the accusations, it was evident this Harangon was reliving a distressing memory and laying bare his soul before them. Seeing this, Lux softened her gaze and dismissed any lingering doubts about a clandestine alliance between this chaotic mess of a rabbit and the supposed formidable entity a secret group in this town is trying to summon forth. Tarth, a man now in his early 50s, wearing a haunted expression, began to recount a tale that unfolded in his childhood that occurred back in his hometown called the Wild Wooded Place, within the Maypline biome. Lux would know this place is rather close to her own hometown in Maypline, called Greenbriar's Gate. Tarth speaks of a time when he was a spirited and mischievous young lad, often wandering off the beaten path in search of materials his family could make use of in their tailor shop, though he'd happily scrounge some wild-grown sustenance if something tickled his fancy. Fate led him to an extraordinary discovery, a magically shimmering golden apple tree, its ethereal glow captivating his young, hungry eyes. Succumbing to temptation, he crossed a hazardous river and leapt to devour one of those enchanted fruits. Only then, a few bites in, to be thrust into a disorienting haze of hallucinations, during which he had been confronted by the voice of a condescending old woman, her malicious laughter echoing through the air as she chastised him for his audacity. This malevolent hag, with her wicked machinations, cast him into a realm of sickness and illusions. Her voice was angered at first, until Tarth innocently shared he thought the golden apples were for everyone and anyone. Something about the fact that Tarth called them golden apples gave this being a surprised pause, before she moved to taunt him, asking if he wanted to see his mother. In his disoriented state he apologized and agreed, but she was a filthy liar. The old crone had him follow a string of lights, and then kicked him forcefully down a concealed stairwell, hidden behind the veil of an innocent-looking tree. From that point onward, Tarth's memory becomes a mess of fragments. The next thing he could recall, though only recently, he had found himself trapped in a state of semi-consciousness, enveloped within the grip of an immense hand. Another hand, its touch strangely intimate, smeared a warm, viscous substance onto his trembling form, all the while accompanying the unnerving act with a haunting lullaby. The towering figure, a feminine presence cloaked in mystery, with a swooning voice addressed him as Adam, my precious son. He could not respond to correct her, his body paralyzed by fear. As the oozing substance encased his eyes in a translucent orange film, Tarth's vision faded to black. After that, the next thing Tarth remembers is a piercing light slicing through the void, rescuing him from the clutches of the warm, never-ending slumber. A mighty centaur, exuding power and authority, yanked Tarth out of the ooze sack. The centaur bestowed upon him a single coin, issuing urgent instructions to flee through the tunnel he had carved, promising safety within the Centaurian clan if he could find them and show them the coin. Then a monstrous woman's blood-curdling scream pierced the air, her grotesque neck elongating as she lunged towards the centaur, unleashing a terrifying assault. Even the mere recollection of her face sent Tarth's fur prickling in a clammy sheen of cold sweat. With one final magical boost of aid from the centaur, Tarth escaped with haste, traversing a treacherous tunnel that bloomed with evil fungus, threatening to ensnare him in their deadly embrace. Yet, against all odds, Tarth persevered, running ceaselessly and striding long past the exit of the tunnel, until exhaustion overcame him, and he collapsed. Despite teetering on the precipice of death, Tarth's salvation had arrived in the form of patrolling scouts from the Centaur clan. They discovered his frail and emaciated body, and took him under their benevolent wing, nursing him back to health over the course of several years. Within the sanctuary of their care, Tarth not only regained his strength, but also delved into the mystical arts of the Fae and the ancient wisdom of Druidism. Among the centaurs, he found solace and camaraderie, forging a deep bond with his best friend and brother from another mother, Roland, who is the son of the centaur that had rescued Tarth from the clutches of that monstrosity. That formidable centaur was the leader of the clan. His name was Lyclocleus. Unfortunately, both Tarth and the Centaur clan had eventually come to suspect Lyclocleus perished after saving him. But Roland never gave up hope. The centaurs just never did manage to find that tunnel Tarth escaped from. Tarth's fragmented memories draw blank for a while after that, but he vaguely recalls some tense circumstances compelling him to part ways with the clan that had become his home. So, he finally embarked on a quest to find his way back to his real home realm and get back to his real parents. It was an arduous journey, and much time had passed, leaving him feeling lost and hopeless many nights. A few memories Tarth has been able to recently recall, but not wholly relevant to the subject. So, Tarth lastly shares remembering having found himself relentlessly pursued by wicked, diminutive fungal beings, incessantly referring to him as the child of my Corgi. While cornered and vulnerable while lost in the Fae, he unwittingly was trapped and fell back into the clutches of the malevolent hag who had originally thrust him into this nightmare. The hag offered Tarth a shrouded and precarious proposition, her voice dripping with devilish mockery, saying, "If you wish to return to your original home, you'll have to make a deal with me." She tauntingly caressed the Harengon's soft face, looking him into the eye hungrily, as she pulled a blackened seed from the breast of her blouse before giving a creepy snicker and saying, "Simply take this seed with you and plant it urgently. Failure to do so will result in a gradual deterioration of your mental stability, of which, once it reaches a certain point, you will ultimately be forcibly brought back into this domain under my control." In a moment of trauma-induced panic, Tarth accepted the deal, and the hag handed him another gold-shimmering apple that she informed him is actually called Nert. He consumed this fruit of deceit, called Nert, and found himself lunged into the ethereal cosmos, floating aimlessly and helplessly, sad and scared, far older than what he was at the start of this hell, but mentally right back into the frozen little boy he once was. A copper-scaled dragon crawled from the distance towards him, majestic and mighty, scary but stunning. From the dragon, a woman's coy but gentle voice spoke with a tone of curiosity. "You seem awfully under-equipped to be doing planar travel on your own, little Leveret, and your threads of fate seem to be humming ominously." Tarth was too overwhelmed and confused to muster the cognitive strength it'd take to logically address a fucking dragon. Seeing this, the majestic being erupted its form into a sea of scarlet butterflies, then taking on the shadowy silhouette of a woman. She cautiously reached her hand for the seed hanging from Tarth's neck to scrutinize it closer, while speaking warmly with some hesitation. "How intriguing and concerning. Guard this closely, little Leveret. Don't be careless with it. Resist her influence for as long as you can handle, and be sure not to plant this seed until you can find it a home that is truly peaceful and purposeful. If you can manage the courage to handle this burden, perhaps both your fates can be changed for the better." While speaking this, the shadowed woman tied a red string around Tarth's wrist, and it faded into him. It was unclear to Tarth which her this being was referencing that he needed to resist. Was it the powerful hag, or his giant fungal captor that called him Adam? It's also unclear to Tarth what this being meant by both fates, as if some other ally yet known to him now has a connection that relies on his choices with the seed. Morphing back into her majestic copper dragon form, she glided behind Tarth, ready to push him towards Gikarin, but first whispered into his ear more playfully, "By the way, boy, I rarely go out of my way to do mortals favors. You simply were an interesting thing that crossed my path, so do me a favor, little Leveret, in exchange for having helped you. Amuse me, show me what you got, and that my efforts weren't for naught. Good luck, kid." And with a firm push, Tarth soared back into his home dimension, cutting through the clouds and free-falling, but having passed out and felt no impact when landing. Upon awakening, the golden apples in Tarth's bag had visually changed into hideous brown shrooms that immediately puffed spores into his face and sent him into the very dream he and Mimith had informed the party of previously. The two of them were trapped in a castle being chased by a giant hand that captured Tarth's father. They were also lead out of this dream to safety by scarlet butterflies. Anyway, with everything learned at Zombu thus far, between the leadership journals, accounting logs, and Gribble's retelling of the leadership meeting, both Mimith and Tarth feel confident the hand in their dream was that of the Greater Mothers, and for Tarth, it's now evident that same being was the one who held him captive all those years. It's unclear what the hag's purpose of letting him come here was. The revelations of Tarth's backstory would be darkly concerning for most to learn, but for the emotionally dysregulated goblin Gribble, who believes himself to be a dragon, and was actively invading the Harengon's personal space like a restless dog desperate for a bone. Absolutely fixated on learning more about the copper dragon lady with scarlet butterflies. The goblin seemed just as excited as he was for some reason, furious and impatient. But sidestepping the green child's bouncing energy, Thotham tried to further inquire about the seed. But as Tarth went to remove it from around his neck, it seems the seed has attached itself to his chest cavity. Upon giving it a hard tug, Tarth felt his heart give a single solid pound, an intense full body pain, as if his life might be compromised if he attempted to remove it. Tarth has no idea when that happened, and gave a nervous laugh. It's been just one chaotic, confusing trauma after the other for this Harengon. As Thotham went to take a look with a low-rolled medicine check, he deductively concluded the seed was indeed attached and grown into Tarth. This was for the most part the entirety of Tartholomew Piddlesquire's backstory, His memory is still a bit addled. He hasn't been back in his home world for that long, and memories are still tricking back to himself slowly. Nonetheless, the party agreed Tarth was no enemy, and if anything, he was someone potentially needing to be protected and keep away from this supposed greater mother if they ever encountered her. As it seems she has a greater purpose for him, that they all would greatly want to avoid learning what that fate might be. It was late, and the party was desperate for sleep. But it wouldn't be possible yet due to their next-door neighbor pounding furiously. Exasperated, everyone in the party got up to confront the rowdy neighbor, except Gribble. He stayed behind to glare and bitch out the ceiling privately, but was coaxed into joining his troubled roommates upon hearing their voices shout through the wall with a sullen and nervous, "Uh-oh." The party, guided by Dandrick Thistleleaf, a halfling whom Thotham had protected during their intake into Zombu, and recently released from solitary confinement, entered a room only to be met with a horrifying sight. The floors were sticky with aged blood, and the senior halfling was desperately in need of a bath. But he had a clogged tub. To their shock, the tub turned out to be clogged by the bodies of his 3 roommates. Dandrick, clearly mentally unwell himself, believed them to be alive, and accused them of being intentionally unhelpful. As Mimith and others tried to offer Dandrick the use of their bathroom, Tarth and Lux noticed a flesh-colored bubble growing from the tub faucet. It burst, releasing writhing chunks of ooze that resembled thick maggots, which then fused together to consume the bodies in the tub. Some of the wriggling substance landed on Dandrick, who continued to complain about his roommates while the ooze crawled into his mouth and corners of his eyes, eventually causing him to contort and struggle as they took over his body from the inside. Another bubble formed in the tub faucet, prompting the party to try and flee. However, the second burst resulted in a wide enough spread to create an arm from the oozing mass and connecting with Dandrick's body to merge the two, throbbing piles together, into a fleshy, pulsating monster the party was no force to confront. Mimith, an experienced monster hunter, admitted never encountering an ooze this strange before. But nonetheless, she advised treating it like others, and avoiding slashing weapons, as they would cause it to split into 2 foes. The party focused their attacks while juggling with twisted stomachs, but were able to quickly weaken it. The ooze, driven by self-preservation, attempted to retreat into the tub drain. However, Mimith dealt a final blow, punching the remaining mass until it ceased its writhing, and was assuredly dead. Then the party debated on what to do, who to tell. But just the same with their confrontation just yesterday night with the people in the canal. If there were such a person, the party wouldn't be in the situation they are in now, would they? Gribble making the connection of how Chief of Police Baal Kethus had taped off his tub and bathed out of a bucket, as well as Lux speculating how the party shares the same plumbing as their now deceased neighbors, along with the party's knowledge of the supplements from Mito Mice Corporation being the potential smoking gun to all this misery. The party opted to stand guard while bathing and allow Tarth to perform a cleansing ritual on all the water they drink and use going forward. Tarth's once seemingly odd behavior and chanting with the Shillelagh has now become a respected and appreciated asset among the rest of the party. Everyone readily acknowledged they've all already been tainted, but if the amount ingested over time matters, at least this reduces their exposure any further. One can hope anyway. As a last thought from Thotham, he mentioned being unsure if Dandrick had come down with the delirium, or perhaps snapped and gone senile. But if the former, and that happened despite joining this company town at the same time as himself, well, that left the air heavy. Because maybe this had something to do with the fact Dandrick just came from being released from solitary confinement. Maybe not. But if so, what does that say for real Dilga's fate? Hopefully she can hang in there. Time will tell. The next morning after getting little sleep, the party was anxious to greet their new mentor, who is Orixian in disguise as Officer Raywong. He came in rather skeptical of Tarth, and only yielded when Lux and Gribble insisted in the Harengon's favor that he's innocent. Though despite that favor, Tarth being low on sleep and stressed out ended up taking his angst out on Orixian, who really doesn't take kindly to that. The two buttheads as Orixian seared in that Tarth was a simple unforeseen third wheel and never meant to be a part of this operation, and that he could march his ass home between the monster nests at any point and he wouldn't give a flying fuck. Either buck up and help the cause, or get out of the way and quit wasting everyone's time. Tarth ended up casually apologizing in an abrupt shift of mood, stating he was agitated and needed a hit of his pipe to chill himself out, and offered Orixian a hit. Upon seeing the pink, clearly magically enhanced dust, Orixian's interest was piqued. He glanced over at Lux and Gribble for their thoughts as they secretly shook their heads no. But with a failed persuasion check, it'd be awfully rude of this fellow fancier of trying new things to reject someone's friendly attempt at an apology. Orixian took a hit and enjoyed his high, stating fondly how he wanted to punch Tarth a minute ago, but now wanted to kiss him. The high was smooth and sweet, and Orixian's hands started to glow gold, which he was rather amused by that. But as he passed the pipe back to Tarth and touched him, the gold was transferred into Tarth. Orixian was slightly bummed to lose his shiny hands, but at least the two men weren't at each other's throats anymore. Thotham, looking to make sure everyone was on the same page, stepped forward to assert to Orixian that he feels strongly invested in helping the workers of Zambia and wishes to seek out justice even if it means getting his hands thoroughly bloody and watching skulls bounce. Both Tarth and Mimith concurred. Orixian whispered to Lux and Gribble that for a cleric that worships the justice seeker, Thotham was rather refreshing and not difficult to be around. The duo agreed, Lux further noting the Goliath has been both reliable and entertaining. Continuing discussing the matters at hand, unfortunately despite Orixian having conveniently taken on the disguise of an officer who is a part of the secret GMC police unit. He hasn't figured out a way to extract crucial information that wouldn't compromise himself. He doesn't quite know how to act as the officer of the skin he's wearing, so has opted to be quiet and just listen. Orixian moved on to explain the work assignments Baal and Loosberg assigned the party, and while doing so mentioned Mimith's servant debt was fully paid, and like Tarth without a contract, they'd need to keep working to maintain room and board since a caravan isn't inbound for another month. Lux, having already known about Mimith's debt from the stolen leadership tower letter, scoffed at the reminder of the Dragonborn's privilege. The discussion moved on to what the party's goals would be upon finishing work, and the topic of Rildilga's 1,200 gold bail came up. Everyone in the party counted up their money, but they can't come remotely close to paying it. No one except Lux, of course, who was keeping her lips sealed about the 1,500 gold stolen from Butrin Blazenfoot's office. When Mimith asked Lux how much money she had, noticing the Eladrin's silence, Lux deflected, stating Mimith had no place to be asking that when Mimith just had all her debt paid by her rich family. Orixian caught a whiff of the tension, and not wanting to replicate the adversarial nature he and Tarth had but a moment before, admitted he had withheld a certain fact about Thotham and Mimith from Lux and Gribble that he had hoped would come out more organically. Plus, he doesn't make a habit of revealing other people's private matters if not necessary. But Thotham, Mimith, Lux, and Gribble all share a common enemy to some degree: the corporate and politicized Iskgale Family. For Gribble, the Iskgale Family company is the same one excavating and depriving the once rich, humbling bogs biome of its precious resources for profit, which is what is directly causing the goblins and hobgoblins at battle with one another for survival. For Thotham, it's the Iskgale family that owns the cabin lodging company, that has completely taken over his clan's land, with the help of the Empire, to turn it into some vacation spot with the help of Thotham's father, Thalak, who rode on Thotham's earned fame as the Bear Killer's father. For Mimith, these are her blood relatives that her mother had ran away from, long before Mimith was born. The same family that, when Mimith received inheritance meant for her mother that came from the death of former Grand Chancellor Rogar, the only populist politician in the Empire. The rest of the Iskgale family, clearly cut from a different cloth than Rogar, had sued Mimith to return the inheritance back, which was no longer possible to do without hurting a lot of people, since Mimith used the funds to try and make a difference in the lives of as many people as possible. Unable to pay it back, she was thrown into an insurmountable debt. Lux venomously pointed out the fact that one member of that cursed Iskgale family of greed still clearly cares about her. While even Lux would logically know this accusation is unfair, considering the contents of the stolen letter she herself read, outright rejected Mimith of any true warmth. Emotionally, Lux could not help but seethe, since a member of the Iskgale family was the very employer that backstabbed her and set her up to end up in this hellhole. Mimith, being young and not having lived a life that would have exposed her to such complicated deceit until she met her own blood family in court, simply shut down solemnly, not knowing how to respond and reach Lux, sadly internalizing the fact her blood has harmed so many people in many different ways. The Iskgale family, to some degree, played a not small role in ruining the lives of 4 out of the 5 party members. Months ago, Orixian and Moravi, when having snuck around and read Mimith and Thotham's contract files, felt this fact would make for the best odds of everyone getting along and agreeing to help with the cause, and shuffled the files into their secret informant, Gregious' new mentor pile. Tarth was just the random monkey wrench the rest of the party surprisingly learned to juggle with. Getting back to business though, Orixian escorted each party member to their designated work assignments, which were pettily curated by Baal and Loosberg. Since Lux is apparently good with knives, she was assigned to kitchen duty, which is also where her former mentor Gregious was reassigned after the North Pole burned down. She was confronted with having to butcher a buffalo, and the menu item was something that makes her nauseous: beefaloaf. Yuck. But thankfully, after impressing her half-orc co-chef with a graceful removal of organs from the body and a bloody high five, she persuaded him into taking the extra time to make buffalo steak instead. An officer who clearly just wanted to be annoying and get more food returned his steak, claiming it was too tough. Gregious apologized for having to deliver Lux such unsavory news, and she did not care. She took the half-eaten steak and burned it on the stove, and flatly instructed Gregious to return it. The tiefling expressed mild concern he was going to be chewed out for this, but quickly smirked, stating it was worth it, just to see the drama unfold. The half-orc chuckled and shook his own head nervously. Not long after, Gregious ran back into the kitchen, hiding behind Lux. as the officer and the yappy bootlicking kitchen manager Lucille came charging in demanding answers for this deplorable behavior. Lux shrugged and unapologetically stated the food was fine. The cop angrily spat back that the food tasted like shit. Lux expressed a sarcastically mournful apology for the unfortunate fact the cop was already so well acquainted with the taste of literal shit. A high intimidation check left the cops stunned and speechless. Gregious from behind added to the embarrassment with a gasp and a tauntingly trollish expression of, "Ooh, you just got dissed!" And then swiftly, the two of them were forced out of the kitchen by the irate barking manager and made to attend to the laborious job of cleaning and purifying Zambieu's main water source. While there, Lux noticed one of the water additives had the same logo from the supplement invoice for Mitomyce Corp. After hearing out Gregious express gratitude to Lux for saving him, and how he initially planned to repay it back to her by, quote, doing some private dancing for cops to help get her bail paid fast, unquote. But then, Lux ended up released anyhow. Gregious strongly urged it bothers him not knowing how to pay her back, and to please tell him the moment she can think of something. With that aside, Lux implored Gregious, speaking only through her eyes once the manager Lucille came out to observe them, to not dispense the supplements into the water. Clearly, he was confused as to why, but nonetheless, Gregious followed Lux's lead, and they both poured the supplements out behind the water vessel without getting caught. Lux made sure to pocket some of the supplement for herself to bring back to the party. Moving on to Gribble, leadership finds it condescendingly hilarious this little goblin is convinced he's a fire-breathing dragon. So to try and break him, they assigned him to work in the refinery, where he'd be working with the biggest and baddest lizard folk, dragonborn and fire-resistant tieflings in Zambieu, in a grueling oven of labor. Gribble could not have been happier, as he bounced up and down for joy much to Orixian's grimacing concern. A needlessly assholish lizard folk cackled at Gribble's entrance and attempted to bully him relentlessly by first assigning the small kiddo to pump the bellows. Gribble couldn't even manage to get a single deflation out of it, as the room cackled and mocked him, reminding him of his time back with the goblin tribe being relentlessly harassed after being chosen by the shamanic flame. In this moment of seething struggle, the intended audience of Gribble's ceiling glaring the other night finally made her entrance in the recesses of the goblin's mind. The goddess Deaa, speaking to him, was completely casual and informal, stating with a tempting voice, "My little dragon, you're not going to allow them to keep looking down on you, right?" While it's true the gods more than ever have made their existence known and unapologetically intervene as they war amongst themselves. Even still, this level of personalness has never, ever been spoken of in history. At least not directly with a god. At best maybe their avatars, but definitely not the gods themselves. And yet, here's a 10-year-old, impulsive glass cannon for a goblin, not hesitating to chew out the goddess of luck, tricks, and inconvenient truths, who is both fondly and fearfully referred to as the Grand Revealer among her worshippers. Gribble growled at her in his mind for not having spoken to him for a while. But alas, there is nothing any of the gods hate more than being bored, and that is the singular thing they all passionately agree on. Deaa, having to watch Gribble pace back and forth in a jail cell yelling at every passerby, stating he was a dragon, grew old fast. But now that he's out and about, stirring the pot and poking at conspiracies, he has her endearing attention again. Deaa snipped back. That Gribble, too, has not prayed to her or worshipped her name out loud for a while. Thus, she was also being petty and not feeling quite as generous. Gribble pouted and then deflected back onto the goddess how she didn't inform him she spoke to someone else, and never revealed to him that she was a dragon, referring to the copper dragon of Tarth's backstory. The goddess Deaa scoffed. If Gribble wanted an official list of the many thousands of beings she speaks to in a given day, she could flood and shut down his brain if he so pleased. Which he didn't. As for the dragon form, as a goddess, she can take on whatever form she fucking wants. Scarlet butterflies with copper fanfare are typically her chosen form when she wants to show mortals a sign and doesn't need to claim the credit or scare them off. As for Tartholomew, she just happened to bump into that cute little leveret that day, and their meeting occurred before she and Gribble ever met. Gribble was only 1 year old when Deaa's encounter with Tarth happened. Deaa and Gribble did not have their first communion together until he was 5 years old. But the goddess did chuckle when asked if he was the person she referred to when discussing changing both their fates to Tarth back then. Deaa smugly and vaguely stated, maybe, being pushed back to the present for a moment. Gribble whined as he resisted his impulse to burn the cackling lizard folk still taunting him whilst his conversation with the goddess, completely stuck on how to prove himself. Deaa, mildly annoyed in tone, reminded the goblin if he needs her help, he knows how to ask for it, and can do so on a monthly basis. And caving into the sin named pride, Gribble internally asked for her aid with a sweet tone. As cute as the goddess may find him, she insisted only this one last time would she acknowledge his silent request. Going forward, if he wants her to acknowledge his request for help, he must do so by praying, speaking aloud his committed faith to her. in order to utilize her gift. And of course, the little shit rolled a religion check, natural 20. Sigh. Thus, still standing on the bellows as a crowd sneered at him, Gribble leapt so fast in the air, a mere mortal's eyes could barely perceive it. He reached a height logically incomprehensible for a creature of his size, and after a most beautiful backflip in the air, this 3'2" goblin came soaring back down as if shot from a long-range missile launcher. Upon impact of the bellows, the air pressed out in a fierce gust that overfed the flames and sent them menacingly reaching and licking for every person who had laughed at him, forcing and scaring them to rush backward 30 feet away. As if that wasn't enough, Gribble hopped off the bellows, which continued to pump at the perfectly desired pace of productivity all on its own, as if it turned into a magical object just from the mere presence of this goblin's mystifying grace. And yes, rumor has it, that bellow is still independently pumping. This fierce display succeeded in completely fending off the crowd of jerks that were once loyal to this lizard fellow. The other workers now either outright avoided Gribble in abject fear, or turned to his defense fully respecting his superiority. But this asshole didn't know when to call it quits. He moved Gribble to another station to work beside an elderly dragonborn who happens to be blind. His only job is to produce flame to heat a crucible. Gribble's task was to simply hold the object in the right place for the dragonborn. But while doing so, the asshole lizard shoulder-checked the elderly man, sending his flame to burn Gribble for 3 hit points. This triggered a fight breaking out between them, and even though Gribble lost the fight, which was unfair to begin with prompting of his goddess reminding him that allowing others to look down on himself was allowing them to look down on her. At the very least, Gribble got the last laugh and set the lizard folk's shorts on fire as the goblin stealthily escaped. Nonetheless, he made a permanent respectable impression on everyone else's minds in that room. Perhaps this respectability will be a useful asset later. Something Gribble can keep in mind, but we shall see.